Hello, I'm Ken Francis, California licensed marriage and family therapist, presently working in the addiction recovery field. Oftentimes, I have new patients that come in that have never tried to be in recovery before. This is their first attempt at trying to be clean and sober, and many of them don't understand the role of a therapist, and a lot of them don't even know about sponsorship and what a sponsor is. So I like to clarify kind of the difference between a therapist and a sponsor. A therapist is usually somebody who has some type of certification or license, and what that means is they've gone to school and taken classes and worked in the field and gotten a lot of hands-on attention working with a particular population so that they kind of become an expert at what's going on and what they're doing. What this means for me as a licensed therapist is I had to go to school and get a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I had to also do 2,000 supervised hours, and back in the day I had to pass 2 pretty grueling tests to get my state license. And I have my own personal experiences that I sprinkle in with my education to help strengthen my ability as a therapist. Being that there is a license or certificate involved, that means that we have to abide by certain legal and ethical standards. There is oftentimes a licensing board or somebody governing over what we do to make sure that we do what we're supposed to do and that we do no harm. Part of this is an ongoing education process and license renewal process. Because of the background that we have in the field, there's usually a fee that comes along with our service. Coming in for therapy is usually a fee-for-service exchange. My hope is always that when you come in, that you leave getting your money's worth. Therapy is also based on the concept of having a treatment plan. And a treatment plan has 3 parts to it. You have the problem, you have the goal, and then you have the action steps or interventions that you're going to use to help get you to your desired goal. The one thing that makes being a therapist in the addiction field a little bit different than the rest of behavioral health is oftentimes we do tend to be a little bit more directive in our approach of helping you with therapy. Oftentimes you're coming in for treatment of substance because you do not have the tools, and you are coming in because you are requesting the guidance and the direction that we offer. Now, in the course of treatment, the goals might change, and sometimes when patients reach a certain goal, then that opens them up to move on to another goal. So there could be short-term goals and long-term goals. But in the end, once most of the goals are reached, the therapy is over. There is an end to it. Some people think that they need to be in therapy forever, but a therapist is not necessarily somebody to be there every time you have an emergency and need to reach out to somebody. Therapist is there to help give you the tools, so in the end you can manage this on your own. Therapists also have different specialties. Some people specialize in couples therapy, some people specialize in children and families, some specialize in trauma, and there are specialized treatments like EMDR therapy and hypnotherapy. When you're looking for a therapist, you might want to ask them what their specialty is or what type of clinical approach they have. And I mentioned that a therapist isn't somebody that you necessarily call every time that you're in crisis. An important part of the therapeutic relationship is healthy boundaries between the therapist and their patient. While we want to be available to you, there are certain limits that we have to stand by. And part of the setting limits is a means of helping our patients grow. One of the boundaries is having a set appointment time. You know that you can rely on this one time to be your time. And the therapeutic relationship is also something that's fairly one way. Most therapists don't disclose much about themselves. When you come in for therapy, this is your dime. This is you to talk about your story and get the help you need. Therapist is not there to get better. Therapist is there to help you. So many therapists do not do any self-disclosure or do limited self-disclosure. And I know the relationship can feel very one-way and off-sided because of that. But on the other hand, you know that when you go in, you're going in for you and to get your needs met and not the therapist's. That's the key with that. The relationship somebody in recovery has with a sponsor is much different than the relationship with the therapist. For one thing, it's peer-driven. When you are looking for a sponsor, you're listening for somebody at a meeting who you can relate with. You are hearing their story, their experience, strength, and hope. Something that you might not really know what a therapist has gone through, what struggles they've had, what they've overcome. But with a sponsor, you're listening and you're finding somebody where there's relatability. You can relate to this person. And this is somebody who has been in your shoes before. And part of them being able to keep their recovery is they become of service and they're giving what they've learned back to you. And this is an exchange where there is no fee involved. This is somebody who, by helping you, is helping themselves. A sponsor should never ask for money, should never ask you to wash their car, should never ask a favor of you. Down the line, if the relationship evolves into more of a friendship, there might be a little bit more balance there as far as that's concerned. But in the beginning, do not let anybody ask for money or ask you to wash their car. This can get messy sometimes because the relationship between a sponsor and a sponsee is not always defined. The boundaries sometimes can be a little gray. For one thing, you're not always meeting at the same time. You might have that arranged, but you might also have the spontaneity and the flexibility to reach out to a sponsor whenever you feel a need, whenever you feel in crisis, depending on how you have established that with your sponsor. So the accessibility with your sponsor is a little bit different than that you might have with the therapist. The primary goal of working with a sponsor is to work the 12 steps of the fellowship that you belong. So if you have an AA sponsor, you are working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you have an NA sponsor, you're working the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. And if you have an ACA sponsor, you might be working the 12 steps of Adult Children of Alcoholics or Tony's A's 12 steps. Either way, the goal is for the sponsor to train you to understand what these steps are, to help you work through them, to grow on your own so that you then in turn can pass these on and help someone else. So primary goal of a sponsor, having you work the steps so then you can turn around and help somebody else work the steps. This is how it works. A secondary purpose of having a sponsor is when you're new to recovery, having somebody to help acclimate you into the fellowship. Somebody that you can meet at meetings, who will introduce you to other people, who will have you start to read the big book and go over that with them, and to be more available to you to answer the questions that might come up for you. Listening to your sponsor's experience, strength, and hope, hopefully you will choose somebody who has a specialty or experiences that are similar to you that you can relate to and that you know will help you. Oftentimes you might belong to more than one fellowship. You might attend Alcoholics Anonymous, but you might also attend Adult Children of Alcoholics as well. So you might be looking for a sponsor who is also well-versed in both fellowships. Some people do get a sponsor in each fellowship, but that can get a little messy sometimes. It's better to get a primary sponsor, but find somebody who has understanding of the other fellowship that you belong. In time, the relationship between a sponsor and a sponsee might develop into more of a friendship. As you move on in your recovery and the years start counting down and you become more stable, you don't have the same need for the sponsor as you did in the beginning. You can have a sponsor and a therapist at the same time. In early recovery, a lot of people have both. Once people reach their goals in therapy, they often just stick with a sponsor. You can work the same issues with a sponsor and a therapist, but you're working at it from two different angles. Remember, the goals are different. Both ways go hand in hand. It's great if you've had a sponsor who's been in therapy and understands what you're going through. And if you're going through a certain program, it's good if the sponsor understands the program that you're going through as well. Some sponsors might not understand what a program is, and they might tell you, you don't need a program. Just do the steps. You don't need a therapist, you don't need a program. Just do the steps. If you are working a therapeutic program and you're working the steps, this might not be the right sponsor for you. You need to find somebody who is supportive and understands the treatment aspect. And on the same note, you also need to have a therapist that understands the 12-step process and where you are in that journey and how you're taking that journey. They go hand in hand. I hope this has clarified the difference between a therapist and a sponsor and each of their roles. If you have any questions, please leave me a note in the comments section. Otherwise, as always I say, thank you for watching.